Hey, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. This is your host, Joe Slepsky, and we are back this week to watch an episode about a guy and his brother, and he's a jerk, and his brother loves him for it. It's almost like it's a prequel to the movie Frozen. And with me this week, I have a special guest calling in, a fan of the show. He's calling in from Montreal, Quebec. Please welcome to Joe on Joe, Mr. Mario Carmel. Mario, welcome to Joe on Joe.
Hi, thanks for having me around.
I'm very excited to have you on today. You are an animator working in the field of animation. So tell us a little bit about that. What do you do, and what kind of stuff have you worked on?
Okay, I've mostly worked on Canadian shows for the last couple of decades. I did work sometimes on South American commercials and TV shows and a couple of features. One was a sequel to a film by DreamWorks, which was based on, I forget what it was, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, but it was called Joseph, King of Dreams. It was a sequel to The Prince of Egypt that came out back in the late 90s. Ben Affleck was the lead voice, and there was Mark Hamill and some other well-known actors in there also.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So when you work in animation, are you an animator? Do you do storyboards? Do you do, what specifically do you do in the process?
Well, it's mostly pretty much everything I've tried to work on. I've directed at one point. I've done storyboards on a few shows. Sometimes what's the best job because I started watching cartoons nonstop when I was a kid. Sometimes I have a job where I see the animation come back from Asia sometimes or some other places, and all I do is watch cartoons and find mistakes in there, which I find the job ever.
Does it make it, working in the field, does it make it difficult to enjoy other pieces of animation because all you do is find the flaws in it, or you see where they cheated, or they cut a corner here or cut a corner there?
But I have this switch I turn on sometimes. Even regular live action movies, I just turn it off and don't look at things technically. And then sometimes I go, okay, take it seriously, and I can find a million mistakes in lots of stuff.
So when you started, so let's take it back a little bit. You had said that you found G.I. Joe right around when it started, like 83, 84. You said you were in art school. So what were you studying art? Like what fields were you studying?
Well, I started college, and at first I wanted to do comics. I was a big comic guy.
Sure. What did you read? What were you reading at the time?
Everything. Marvel stuff, Tomb of Dracula, superhero stuff.
Awesome.
I started, I think I was 4 or 5 years old. I started buying comics at the little store close by, and just kept on buying. And I wanted to do comic books for a living, but what happened was when I was of age to start learning how to do it, my biggest how can I say it? The comics characters I loved the most was the Justice Society of America.
Love it.
But right at that moment, something happened in the comics field, which was called Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Crisis.
And I said, finally, maybe something will happen with them, and they'll get their series back, because they had their own series a few years before. But all of a sudden, Crisis happened, and then poof, they just completely disappeared.
Yeah, something happened. They disappeared.
Some of them died, some of them disappeared, and I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I just lost interest. But then I wanted to know what to do with myself, and I was going away to college, and I would come back during the summer and suddenly watch afternoon TV, and suddenly I see this show on television. I said, what is this? Because I never considered animation, because at that point the most popular thing was the Smurfs, or there was the closest was Plastic Man, I think. And
yeah, sure, yeah, Super Friends, Plastic Man, absolutely.
But it was
Hula Hula. Plastic Man's partners was Hula Hula.
Hula Hula. Oh yeah, the whole But I said no, that I wasn't really considering it, and that wasn't. Disney was going into a period of, I could say, lethargic period.
Yeah, Disney animation at that time was really, really in the pits.
That's right.
So did you start doing hand drawn, and then do you now work? Obviously, you must now work computers, right?
Yeah. Right now, I'm working with. I'm doing storyboards on the computer. I have a tablet in front of me, and I just draw from it. It took a while to get used to. Not drawing directly.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. How was the transition going from doing hand drawn to computer? It sounds like you adapted pretty well.
It took about, I'd say, 1 or 2 weeks that I stopped syncing my hand with what I was drawing. Like I didn't always look down at my hand. I just started looking at the screen. And it worked just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you find that it sped up your process overall?
I miss the texture that paper gives you, and let's just say sometimes trouble happens. Like a couple of weeks ago, I worked on a file, and I think I messed up somewhere, and I lost work that I did for 3 days. And I think I saved it at the wrong place. So I looked for it for a half day, and I said, forget it. I'll just redo everything.
Oh, no. You need to call Mainframe at that point.
That's right.
Mainframe, I need your help. Get up in here. So when you first found G.I. Joe is a real American hero. You're Canadian. Did that have any impact in your attraction to? Obviously, you're a fan of it. You were attracted to it. Did that come into play in any way?
Probably not the super militaristic thing about it, but I just looked at it with all the code names and the personalities. I said, these guys are superheroes.
Yes.
With guns.
Totally. Yeah. So lasers, technically.
Yeah. Sorry, lasers. I guess the supervillains were Destro and Cobra Commander and everybody else. I guess I just made a transition like that.
Yeah, that's great. You have helped me out actually a couple times. One thing I don't do on the show very much is I don't do a lot of podcasts. They'll do like a corrections, segment, like because when you're potting and you're talking, everyone says something that's factually wrong or they get it mixed up and the wrong word comes out of their head. And I do that all the time when I listen. It's pretty funny because I listen to the edits and I hear myself saying the wrong thing. And sometimes I'll go in and dub over and hopefully it's unnoticeable where I get the right word in there. But a lot of times I don't, and I end up chuckling at myself. And one of the things when you first reached out to me, I really appreciated it, and I haven't had a chance to address it on the show because I was actually going to wait till you got on, is you pointed out in the episode with Leatherneck, when Leatherneck goes back to his military academy, that the enemy, the bad guy, Buck McCann, which it's funny, that was one of the times that I had to overdub because I knew it was Buck McCann in my pre-watch, and I really loved the name. And as we're watching it, I kept saying the word Butch McCann. And so I'm editing it, and I'm like, why am I saying Butch? I know it's Buck McCann. So you pointed out to me, you reached out and said that it was actually they named him after Chuck McCann, who was the actor that played Leatherneck. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm assuming that's what happened. It would be too much of a coincidence.
You're totally right. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. So I want to say thank you. I appreciate that. That was a really great insight, and I want to share that with all the Joe on Joe listeners. Did you have any of the toys, or were you just a animation guy?
I guess I was.
You were a little older.
I was older, but once in a while I would get something. But I think it was mostly the vehicles. I bought a few of those just because of the. I guess I was still a big nerd around that time. Like I couldn't resist. What was it? Cutter's vehicle, the whale.
The killer whale. Yeah, whale's great.
Like I couldn't resist when I saw that at the store. I said I have to have that.
I don't see why you should resist that. That's a wonderful impulse to have. I agree 100%.
But I didn't go crazy and buy the. What do you call the giant
USS flag
shuttle, the flag,
or
the
Defiant? Yeah.
I just bought some things if I thought they were super cool, I guess.
Yeah. Have you ever used action figures to illustrate your animations, like when you're trying to figure out what a figure would look like for your animation work? Have you ever posed action figures?
No, I think it's mostly I would get people to do it, but I did do a couple of setups, but they were from older toys I had, which were how big were they? Like 10 inches? Back in the 70s, there were something called Big Jim. Does that ring a bell to you?
Yeah, wait, Big Jim and his Raiders?
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Big Jim and the Pack. The Pack.
That's with the guy who looks like Telly Savalas.
Correct. Yeah, because they used to advertise in the back of comic books.
That's right. I think I bought a few of that just because it appeared in the comics.
That was Jim Brown, right? Jim Brown, wasn't that modeled after Jim Brown, the football player?
It's possible.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, they had the best ad in 70s Marvel comics. Big Jim and his pack. It was great. And I think the pack was like stood like it was P period A period kind of thing. So good. So G.I. Joe, did you have any favorite Joes that you connected with?
I was always a big fan of Duke.
Yeah.
Just because of his voice, I actually contacted the actor a few years ago just to thank him, and he was nice enough to respond.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. I just said if there was a reason I got into animation, it's mostly because of him, because this guy was in every show possible.
Yeah, the great Michael Bell, yeah.
And let's see, Duke, and every time there would be a Frank Welker character like Wild Bill, and if I go into Transformers, he did Megatron and some other characters. So it would all. I think if the character had a really great voice, I gravitated to him. Like I forgot his name, the sailor guy with
Shipwreck.
Shipwreck.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If he had a great voice, I loved him.
Yeah, Shipwreck's fantastic. Awesome. Well, I'm excited. So today's episode we are watching is called My Brother's Keeper. And I opened the show with comparing it to the movie Frozen because it's not terribly dissimilar from the plot of the movie Frozen. The main character treats his brother terribly, and the brother is just a sycophant and loves him unconditionally, which is what happens in the movie, the much beloved movie Frozen, which I have a severe hatred for. But so the other cool thing that we get in this episode is the Joes visit a science fiction convention, which is a trope that's been used at a lot of shows, and I love it. I think it's great.
Comic-Con.
Absolutely. So we're gonna watch My Brother's Keeper. If you're out there on the internet and you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram at Joe and Joe Pod. That's Instagram, and that's also Facebook and also Twitter. Or you can send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. I'd be happy to hear from you. If you're on iTunes or Stitcher or any place that accepts reviews, if you want to give the show a review, that'd be fantastic too. It helps us grow the show. So, Mario Carmel from Montreal, Quebec.
Yes, sir.
Are you ready, my Canadian friend?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, here we go with My Brother's Keeper. So we've got the fantastic opening. So you said you were primarily went for the vehicles or play sets or anything.
That's right. Sometimes bad guys with their if the costumes were colorful enough or interesting enough, like right now we're seeing the Terrordrome. What is that little red escape pod that they have?
Oh, that's the what is that? That's the Strato Viper Fluid. I was the I used to know this. You're quizzing me. You're quizzing me right in the face. You're giving me a quiz in the face.
The Strato Viper. I love that guy. I think I bought him at like a secondhand one once, and I said this guy is cool.
Yeah, he's cool. So I had the Terrordrome, and I loved that ship that shot off the middle. Man, I completely blanking on it. So we're going to start with the episode. It is called My Brother's Keeper, written by Buzz Dixon. Buzz Dixon, fantastic.
The man.
Big fan of his stuff. Got some trouble bubbles and kind of searching the island, kind of keeping on patrol. And we've got two devilfish with Lowlight and Dial Tone sneaking. We don't really know why they're sneaking on the island, but we assume they're into something. And this episode's also really cool because, one, you've got Serpentor as a main character.
Yes.
They went out of their way. Obviously, he got the big introduction, but then he's always kind of sort of played the role of like he would show up as a foil. You know what I mean? He wasn't as prevalent as, say, Cobra Commander was in the early episodes.
Well, he doesn't always take direct action. He's more the evil behind the scenes sometimes.
Right, which is great, though. I think that's what Cobra needed. And we've also got some of the Voltronic Galaxitor, which is the gimmick of the day, which is great.
What is that, anyway?
I don't really understand. But the other thing that's great about this episode, it is we have an appearance by Sergeant Slaughter.
One of the greatest minds.
He's great.
Yeah, who also, they went to great pains to introduce him, and then he never really was on the episodes. Probably a budgetary issue, but he doesn't really show up in the regular episodes of the show. He only shows up on the special ones, the special miniseries, right?
Right.
So
I've always wondered
if
Sergeant Slaughter would get grief from the other wrestlers going, why is it that the real Sergeant Slaughter is not as buff as cartoon Sergeant Slaughter?
It's funny you mention that because later on there's a moment where their appearance comes into question, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Dial Tone and Lowlight have been discovered, though, so they're going to have to escape. Kind of escape, but not before Dial Tone didn't overhear them, and he overheard them talking about a science fiction notable science fiction guy who's going to help them complete their project. And they kind of got to make a getaway break for it by diving off the cliffs. This is cool. This is pretty neat, though. Yes, G.I. Joe technically fools Cobra in this moment. But actually, this is a rare moment of Cobra kind of winning. You know what I mean?
This one, yes.
Like, they get a small victory here where they actually blow up a Joe ship and they drive the Joes away. They just didn't happen to kill them, but they did drive them away. And that's a rarity on the show.
They never seem to call for reinforcements, though.
No.
Like, it's always two guys, and if they mess it up, they don't say, please come save us, or we need reinforcements.
Yeah, well, hey, listen, they're Joes. Two guys is all they need, right? And here we go, Sergeant Slaughter with his triple T. Showing up for business.
What a guy.
What a guy. Were you a fan of, did you watch wrestling at the time? Like, were you a crossover fan?
Well, I'm watch a little bit of wrestling, but I thought he was a bit too over the top, even though that around those years, everything was majorly over the top.
Oh, yeah, totally. So here we learn the plan is we need to go to this science fiction convention, and Sergeant Slaughter knows there's only one Joe that can take you to science fiction, and of course, it's the Joe named Sci-Fi. Who's watching an episode of Transformers?
All right, Sci-Fi.
Never saw that model before, though.
Yeah, it was a generic model, but it's a Transformer. It's totally a Transformer. And here we go. We're at... Did you just hear that? Sergeant Slaughter, who's walking around in a tank top with camouflage, said Sci-Fi's uniform is going to make him stick out. We also had a shout out to the Fantastic Four. Someone said, where'd you get your copy of Fantastic Four 28, which is an awesome crossover issue with the X-Men.
Do you think all the super nerdy voices were the writers making fun of comic book people, or they were just in on the game?
I imagine. Oh, that's great. So did you see the cover to that comic book? I have a feeling it was just the regular voice actors going, I'm a nerd. But did you see the cover of that comic book that he dropped? It said Gung Ho Goose, which was a parody of Howard the Duck. And
really?
And Steve Gerber was one of the writers on G.I. Joe.
True.
So that's a little inside joke on this. This is great. There's a little Transformer-y bot in the background.
What year did he do Destroyer Duck?
Destroyer Duck was in the early 80s. It was around this time, actually, yeah. And for those listeners who don't know what Destroyer Duck is, Steve Gerber was one of the leaders in the creator rights for comic book creators to kind of be able to give them some ownership so that Marvel and DC, etc., wouldn't be able to just own these characters forever. It was, it all started with Siegel and Schuster, and Neil Adams helped them out quite a bit in the 70s. Yeah, there's a whole story there. But in order to raise money, because Steve Gerber wanted to get ownership in Howard the Duck, he created a character called Destroyer Duck and worked alongside the legendary Jack Kirby. And they did it as a charity book to raise money for Steve Gerber's legal defense in his fight to retain ownership rights on Howard.
And that book was brutal.
Oh, it was nasty. Destroyer Duck was a militarized duck who technically lived in the same universe as Howard, but since it wasn't a Marvel book, like you wouldn't see Howard. But it was understood that he was a militarized version of Howard from his universe, just wreaking havoc through reality.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. I think they did it. I want to say they did about 4 issues, maybe 3.
I think I just had one of those.
Yeah, it was definitely more than one.
Okay.
But it was limited. And it was amazing Jack Kirby artwork, which was great.
Yes.
Because he's also the poster child for, ownership rights as well. For the Silver Age, at least. So here we got Dr. Mindbender. He's kind of laying out his offer. He's gonna help Jeremy Penser restore his ability to walk, because Jeremy's in a wheelchair. And that's a great line. The writer, God bless you. The writers, we have ways of making you walk instead of talk. I love that so much.
Semi-Nazi guy.
Semi, you think? Yeah, it's so great. So now we're going to get Sci-Fi and Gung Ho in a battle against Mindbender, the Dreadnoks. And frankly, Sarge. Oh, wait, this is amazing. Watch this.
Bunch of costume fans putting on a show.
Wait, watch this. So we have a fan talking about Sergeant Slaughter, who in real life is a wrestler, doing a rehearsed scene, who in real life does rehearsed scenes as wrestling.
Good grief.
There's levels to this that I absolutely adore.
I want to talk to you.
This is a really smart episode.
It's like cosplay, early cosplay. All of this.
Yeah, it's like cosplay wrestling. It's so great.
I think I went to San Diego once back in the early 90s, and they had two actors, one dressed as Spider-Man, and he actually had, what's that silly string? He used it all over his opponent. Everybody cheered like crazy.
Well, we're going to commercial with Thrasher busting through a wall. Today's Filecard Feature is on the G.I. Joe Persuader driver, codenamed Backstop. His file name is Robert A. Levin, and his primary military specialty is armor. His secondary military specialty is mechanized infantry, and his birthplace is Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Backstop injured so many opposing players in junior league hockey that his family had to move to the United States to escape angry parents. During his adolescent years in Detroit, he boxed in the Golden Gloves until he was barred from competition. He spent 2 terms as the undefeated wrestling champion of his high school simply because no one would get in the mat with him. After a short career in the Demolition Derby, Backstop found his true calling in the Army and eventually on the G.I. Joe team. Quote, don't mess with Backstop. Even though he's had more broken bones, ripped tendons, and severed arteries than anyone else on the Joe team, he's still strong enough and strong-willed enough to break, rip, or sever something of yours. Obviously, I'm choosing Backstop today because our guest is a friend from up north. I did not have a lot of history with this character. In fact, I had to Google who was from Canada. This was one of the figures that came out right after I stopped collecting when I was younger. But looking into it, he's pretty cool. I love that he's an ex-hockey player who just got so beat up, and he's so into just blowing things up that of course he's going to join the military and become a tank driver. He drove the Persuader, which is their fast attack tank. It's been described as the intermediate between the Mauler battle tank and the Havoc infantry combat tank, so it can get there faster than you can say offsides. His outfit is pretty cool. It's green and yellow with red boots and red gloves. It actually quite a bit resembles some kind of sports jersey. Not necessarily a hockey sweater per se, But it does look like he's wearing a team-colored jersey, which is pretty neat. I like that. I like to think that there was some coordination between the file card and the way he actually looked. So I'm all for it. Robert A. Levin, Backstop, the hockey-playing G.I. Joe Canadian native. We salute you.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
So the Thunder Machine busts through a poster, right past a poster of Spider-Man.
Excuse me?
And although they missed the hyphen,
Sure hope this works.
but it looked just like Spider-Man. And
Another
Sci-Fi
trans-
drops a giant robot model on top of the Thunder Machine, and he jumps on a mono wheel.
What's it gonna be, boys?
But if it's a mono wheel, why does it have wheels in the back? I'm very confused.
Is a mono wheel like a unicycle?
I think so. I don't know. But those two nerds are fantastic. You know, last year's demonstration was much more realistic. So good. And there's just, you notice no one's running away from this gunfight in the middle of the Comic-Con.
Wow.
The fans are just standing there. There's no panic, no anything.
It's not.
The place is gigantic, and there's maybe 10 to 20 people in there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I also want to point out that Mindbender is not just straight kidnapping Pencer. He is actually giving him the option. You know, like, do you want to walk or not? Do you want to come with us? He's not just kidnapping the guy.
But they've done that in the first season. They would kidnap scientists. What was his name? What was that?
Well,
When
I mean, they normally do just straight kidnap people. They don't.
Yes.
They don't normally say, "Hey, do you want to help?"
you're helping.
Yeah, you're straight helping. So wait, Sergeant Slaughter just tagged
Not quite.
The Thunder
the Thunder
Machine.
Machine with a tracking device, but it looked like he pulled the tracking device off of that transformer.
He needs me.
Like,
You
where did
stay
that
here.
come
This is
from?
no mission for civilians.
Oops.
Yeah, well, Jeremy's brother basically says, "I need to join you because I need help." The cops show up, and in the meantime, Jeremy's brother is slipping into the control panel of the G.I. Joe Havoc.
And he couldn't drive it. I guess he's an idiot savant.
Yeah, and wow, he just stole the Havoc, which is a massive machine with a lot of weaponry on it, rolling down the streets of I don't know if this is Enterprise
San
City
Diego.
or not. Yeah, or San Diego, wherever they're at. But you know,
There's havoc, whoever you are.
they're just
They're not very-
just along for the ride. It's it's a really good drawing of the Havoc.
Yeah.
You know, like it looks
What are
pretty
you
good.
doing here?
Trying to help my
Well, they
brother.
seem to have their C team for the most part for the animation, but I noticed, like right now, I notice he's actually on model.
Yeah. So
Sergeant
are you?
Slaughter.
So yeah, let's talk animation on that. Are you seeing what are you seeing any tricks or any like I can see a little fuzz on the screen right now and all that, but like are you seeing anything that stands out? Anything that you could share with the show about how they would animate all this?
Well, for the most part, if you notice the first season, sometimes an episode would be superbly animated. I think you were talking about one just a few weeks ago. It was $1 Million Medic,
Mm-hmm.
where the characters are drawn amazingly well with shadows and colors and everything. And then sometimes you have episode where if the character even is how do you say it? Anatomically correct, it's a miracle. But sometimes their arms are stretched out or they have tiny heads.
Right.
But I noticed in Japan, this is done in Japan, if I remember right.
Correct.
They would have different teams setting up all the episodes, and sometimes they would be very good with staying on model, and sometimes they would just improvise.
So this is Dr. Mindbender's secret weapons lab.
While we were chatting, we missed a moment where this Jeremy guy, he looked at the design. Although I don't know why, if you're a sci-fi author, why it makes you it gives you the ability to actually make an actual like laser. But anyway, he took one look at the design and was like, "Who's the idiot that designed this thing?" And Mindbender had to go, don't worry about that. It's all good. That's great. Man, the chin on Sergeant Slaughter is massive. That's really a sight to behold. And yeah, here's Jeremy. He is straight up fixing this machine.
He's a complete scientist. He can do everything.
Mm-hmm. He's very
in comics. They do the same thing. They have guys who have a certain specialty, but suddenly they can do everything. Like,
they did on G.I. Joe famously. We talk about how Doc, Doc, who's the medic, was designing laser repulsion devices.
You sell millions down the river just so you can walk. Well, we'll go.
I like Sergeant Slaughter. I like that he starts using the guilt trip tactic where you're going to sell millions down the river so you can walk.
But you're coming anyway.
Right, exactly. I thought, he's going to reason with him. Nope. His next sentence is, I'm physically taking you with me anyway. I just want you to know that you should feel bad about this, and then I'm going to kidnap you.
The Dreadnoks. I love Thrasher.
Yeah, Thrasher's great. I love Monkey Wrench. Oh, fantastic. Sergeant Slaughter just referenced the original miniseries when he was introduced. He said, I ain't forgetting what you did to me, right? So he's referencing Mindbender stealing his DNA, and then also, I want to think, Mindbender embarrassing him by out-wrestling him in the airplane and throwing him out the airplane.
They got a grudge.
Yeah, it's just like Sergeant Slaughter's arch enemy is a shirtless dentist. That's something to be proud of in the WWF locker rooms, So Sci-Fi is shooting at Mainframe's girlfriend, who's she's flying in one of the Swamp Fires.
Swamp Fires.
Yep.
Where's the other Cobra people?
Yeah,
There's nobody.
I do like that the Cobra base just happens to be right on the edge, outskirts of an old abandoned mining town. Like some derelict back, like it looks like the back lot of a movie studio. So we're going to commercial with the Havoc in serious trouble. Hey gang, loyal Joe and Joe listeners know that we love Wildcat Wrestling here. Our friend of the show and frequent guest, Pablo Romero Estevez, he helps run the New Orleans premier and original wrestling promotion, Wildcat Wrestling. It's where wrestlers come from across the globe to compete in the squared circle. And the best part about Wildcat is that if you're not in New Orleans, you can stream them online. Just go to wildcattv.wildcatwrestling.com. That's cat with a K. And use the promo code JoeOnJoe. This will get you a free month to Wildcat TV, where you go to watch commercial-free and extended episodes of New Orleans wrestling. New episodes drop every Monday, and this is the place to get up close and personal with wrestlers like the Southern Stomper Luke Hawx, Stevie Richards, Bob Hardcore Holly, Ray Horace, and Boo Koo Dow, and many, many more. And after your first month, it's just $4.99 per month for all the Cajun calamity you can handle. So go to wildcattv.wildcatwrestling.com, enter Joe on Joe, that's one word, no spaces, and start your subscription today. Because if it ain't Wildcat, it ain't wrestling.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
All right, so Zorana's landing with her Swamp Fire back at Cobra headquarters. And Mario, it's that time of the show. We like to ask our guests if they could be a member of the Joe or Cobra team. What would you be, and what would your specialty, and then what's your name? So have you thought about this?
Well, I came up with one a few weeks ago when you first started talking about this. But then somebody came up with pretty much the same idea, which was the Sean Spicer character.
Oh,
type.
Right.
But what I'll do is I'll keep that idea, but adapt him to another group instead of the Cobras. Because I remember one time Destro had his own subgroup, which was the Iron Grenadiers. Is that it? So I'll keep that character. He's the propaganda for that. I will call him Double Talk.
Nice. You're Double Talk and you're the propaganda minister for the Iron Grenadiers.
Yes, sir.
Hey, listen. If we look at the canon, and we're faithful to the canon, Destro ran a legitimate arms supplying company, right? Mars was, as distasteful as you may think, supplying weaponry to governments is. It was a legitimate company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Every company is going to need a spokesman / PR guy. So we got it. You're Double Talk. You're the Iron Grenadier PR guy.
they have very slick costumes. All these guys from Iron Grenadiers. I feel a little bit evil when I say I like all the designs for them, but that's the way it goes.
Listen, you're an art guy, you're an animation guy. By far, Cobra had the better look. We know this. We know
Yes.
that we know they're down with branding, and we know their outfits absolutely put G.I. Joe in the dust, without a doubt. I mean, just look how great all the Dreadnoks look. Look how great Mindbender looks. Serpentor's outfit. None of that. The coolest Joe look is Snake Eyes, and he just wears all black. You know.
I just can't get into Mindbender's mustache, though.
Well, you know, it was a different time. Well, Sarge and Sci-Fi, they're escaping with the little brother who just caught a bomb that's the most pretty cartoony looking bomb, but he throws it like a perfect football spiral right into the cockpit of the Thunder Machine, stopping Thrasher from murdering them.
This kid can do anything.
Oh, this kid's amazing. And Sergeant Slaughter single-handedly took over a helicopter. It's funny. So Monkey Wrench was in the chopper, right? We saw him throw him out, and Monkey Wrench landed in the water. However, I don't think Monkey Wrench was flying the helicopter. I think Monkey Wrench was riding in the helicopter. So what happened to the pilot?
He's giving him the 5-knuckle.
Yeah. Where did the pilot go? We didn't see him land. I want to think Sergeant Slaughter straight murdered the pilot. There's a dead body next to Sergeant Slaughter that just can't show it on the show. We got a sweet swamp fire Cobra helicopter chase. Lots of parachute action in this show. And the machine's going to overload and it's going to kill Jeremy, unless Timothy and Sci-Fi can rescue him. So this is what I'm saying, and it's going to come into play a little later. People talk about the movie Frozen, and they talk about how it's so great for girls because it shows you how to be good to a sister. It's the exact opposite. That sister in Frozen is terrible to her younger sister, right? Are you familiar with the movie?
Yes. Oh, believe me, I had to watch it many times against my will.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. The music's a lot of fun, and I get it. But it is a terrible lesson because the lesson is it's okay for you to treat your sister or your sibling like complete crap for 10 years because that sister will then sycophantly follow you all the way to the end and then rescue and save you.
Love conquers all.
Love conquers all, right? That's the same lesson we're getting in this episode here. Jeremy treats his brother terribly.
Consider yourself flattered, Timothy.
And he could have had him killed.
Yeah, and even now...
Well, you're a grateful cuss.
And there you go. Thanks, Sergeant Slaughter.
He's always like that.
Even now,
especially when he's trying to say
he treats Timothy like crap.
Timothy, be quiet.
Complete crap. That's not an excuse. This is terrible. That guy is a jerk. He willingly went with Cobra. He treats his brother, who seems like a nice kid. He actually seems a little dopey, if you ask me. I think Timothy's, maybe not the smartest tool in the shed. But his brother treats him like crap, Mario.
I know. I guess there's double messages in there. It's be selfish, go for what your dreams are, but love will conquer all.
Meanwhile, there's the Worlds Without End version of this show where Timothy's like, wait a minute, my brother left to go with Cobra? Oh, okay, he's treating me like a jerk my whole life. Guess what? Let him die. And then everyone moves on with their lives. The Joes stop the Galactivator. They stop it some other way because we know Cobra's never going to win. And life is happier. And Timothy is a happy man, not always under the boot heel of his brother. I'm just saying, I want to blow the lid off this episode. So what did you think?
Wonderful.
Did you enjoy it?
I love this episode. It's one of the few ones I've seen maybe once or twice over the last couple of decades, but it's really fun.
It is. I really like seeing Sergeant Slaughter on a regular episode. I love the use of it. I love the vehicles they use, the Havoc, and seeing the Triple T in action was pretty sweet. I like the use of the Dreadnoks, and seeing Serpentor take a more active role in it was really great. It's a really great episode. It brings up that frozen ire that I have, and I can't get over.
I like that they really severely limited the numbers of Joes in there. I think we saw 4 in all.
Yeah, 5.
With,
Including
Joe.
Hawk. Yeah, it's good. It's good. I definitely like this episode. It's pretty solid. So Mario, or should I say, Double Talk.
Double Talk.
Thank you for being a guest on Joe, my friend, my Canadian friend.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Oh my God, you did such a great job. If you're out there, remember, find me on social media at JoeandJoePod, or send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. And I want to thank everyone for listening. And Mario, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show.
Pleased to be here.
Fantastic. And now you, Joe. And Joeing is half the battle.